I think we can kind of get started. I'll just say one more time, if you don't mind, once you're in, go ahead and mute yourself. And that way you can control your mute. Once you have a question, you can unmute yourself and ask your question. And you don't have to wait for me to unmute you or message me or anything like that. We are going to have a question and answer time at the end, or you're welcome just to unmute and ask during the presentation or whatever you want to call our little clinic for tonight. But I guess I'll start by thanking you guys for getting on here with us. Great to have a nice turnout. We've got, I heard of people from everywhere from Alabama. I see some Michigan are here, some Indiana, some Ohio. So we've got some names from all over the place. I myself am in Tennessee tonight. I'm doing a presentation for a bunch of dealers tomorrow. So yeah, it's a little bit warmer and nicer here than it is in Ohio right now. So I don't mind being here. We're joined tonight by a really good friend of mine and coworker of mine, and that's Andy Sloan. We'll introduce him. Andy, you can say hi to everybody.
How's everybody doing?
Andy's a wealth of knowledge and been really successful both as a breeder and a showman at local, state, national levels. Let's just go ahead and we'll share the screen here so I can get started with the slides. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
All right, cool. So this is Andy Sloan. He's kind of our special guest for tonight. He is a current regional sales manager for Pelleted Feeds. So like I said, he is a coworker of mine, but also somebody that I lean on pretty heavily to do some work on the sheep end at Formula Champions and that brand. So we work pretty closely together. Andy's from Shelby, Ohio. He studied animal science at Lincoln Land Community College and Western Illinois University, where he was on the judging team. Like I said, grew up showing cattle and sheep at the local, state, national level. Had many champions at the Ohio State Fair. He helps run Sloan Club Lambs with his mom and dad, Jim and Sarah Sloan, and he's an integral part of the Formula Champions and Pelleted Feeds team. So we're excited to have him tonight. Thanks, Andy, for jumping on with us.
No problem.
So that lamb there at the bottom of that page, you raised that one, happened to win Kansas City, right?
Yeah, that was this past fall.
Yep.
So we raised that one, sold them in the spring.
Yep.
Last spring.
Awesome. All right, well, let's just dive right in. I wanted to start with doing a little bit of selection. I do this in all of the Formula Champions presentations that I do, but I think we can go a little bit more in depth on sheep and goats tonight, as that being our special topic. And these pictures that I have, I pulled them off of online. This isn't anything that I put together, and if you look in your 4-H books, even though those pictures are older than me, they're still kind of true to what we look for today. We want one that's opened up in their skeleton and has some muscle. Well, Andy, that's why I have you here. Why don't you go ahead and talk about selection on these things?
Yeah, obviously something this slide doesn't say, that where I would start with is find a breeder that you're comfortable working with and that you trust their genetics. And, first and foremost, that's where I would start. Find someone that you want to work with, someone that you trust what they have. And then obviously someone that's trying to progress in the industry. And then judging off these slides that you got here, Levi, starting with the rear view, you want these, from the point of the shoulder back to that hip, you want it to be a triangle. And when we say that, it gets progressively wider as that sheep comes back towards you. So you want their rack big, you want their loin bigger, their hip even bigger, and then obviously a lot of lower leg in them. So, this judging the sheep without the arrows on it, that thing's a little bold in its front shoulder for me. His body shape's good, but that sheep's got a tremendous big hip in him. He's got a lot of lower leg in him. So, judging these, pen widths, number one, obviously the bigger, the wider the hip, the better. Number two, width of stifle to stifle, bigger butt better, as long as that sheep doesn't get outside itself and it's tracking right away from you. Shape and boldness, lower quarter, that's pretty obvious. The more muscle you get right behind them, the better. And then the side profile, you want them tall fronted, you want them good looking. This industry is going to maybe a little larger outline sheep than where we were probably 5 years ago. And then obviously the shallower the chest and shorter bladed we could get them, the better. And then just progress from their back. You want them a little deeper in their flank than they are in their front, in their chest floor, and then dead level down their top. And obviously structure, angles is very important. And that's where finding a good breeder that knows some of this stuff and knows how the genetics will grow out. That's kind of where that's where I would lean to. At Sloan Clublands, we got a variety of different bucks and different genetics, and it's pretty dramatic, even coming from the same bloodlines, how sheep will grow out of each different buck. So, that's where I would start.
Yeah, you said a lot of great things there. Do you feel like, over time, you said we're building them just a little bit taller again. We made them a little bit more modern. We were, in the meantime, trying to pack muscle into them. Now we're to the point where we're trying to make them more correct again. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, I mean, like 5 years ago, we were looking more at the rear view than we were at the side profile. And if you go to a show today, the judges barely handle them. A lot of the genetics out there, muscle really doesn't matter. They got enough.
Yep.
So that's where we study them on the walk and study them on the profile. If you ever see me judge, I barely touch them. I barely handle them. And I barely comment about muscle. So, it's all about angles and look for me.
Great. Okay. We can turn this thing back over, and the same thing goes. This is a sheep and goat clinic, but the same ideals kind of apply, especially when we start with muscle. At the end of the day, this is still a market animal. Muscle is still one of the most important factors, if not the most important factor. You judge some goat shows. Tell me how this applies to the goat also.
Oh, I think it's very similar. A goat naturally is going to break out of the backside of a shoulder compared to a sheep. They're obviously going to round out of their hip compared to a sheep, but a good goat's going to look like a lamb in all honesty, or a fat steer or a pig. Good livestock all looks alike to me. Those better goats win state national shows. They come right out of their top, or right out of their shoulder with a big square rack in them. Their tail heads lifted way up in them. And then obviously, they're big legged, they're cool looking from the side. One thing that maybe goat judges or goat people in the industry put a little bit more emphasis on the front view than probably what most sheep people do, with the chest. Then for me, the biggest indicator of muscle in any livestock is the forerib or the forearm. You look at a bodybuilder or a human, their forearm's ginormous. You look at like a long distance runner in the Olympics, they barely have any muscle. And for me, if you want to tell if one's got true muscle, study their forearm, and that'll tell you a lot. And that's where the goats, when I judge goat shows, first thing they walk in the ring, that's exactly where I look.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And you talked about the goat breeders really laying a lot, and goat judges and just the industry as a whole laying a lot more emphasis on the front end of that goat. We look at those things from the head on. I think we've done so much work, or the breeders have done so much work to really make them stand really wide up front and blow that chest floor apart. We've got to make sure we still make them good and correct on those front two at the same time.
Yeah, you want them the widest chest you can with their shoulders in right.
Correct. Yep. Absolutely. Well, let's. I wanted to kind of put a little spin on it, maybe have a little fun. But this is some of the successful recent champions with Formula Champions. Let me get on to the next. Here we go. So these are some recent high-level wins, of some customers of ours, but a good little variety of sheep. Just wanted to kind of have you talk about maybe a couple of these and pinpoint, where each one of them really excels. If you don't mind taking a second and doing that.
Yeah, we'll start with kind of just describing what they've won. The top left picture is Morgan Evans. Actually, both the left pictures.
Left, yeah.
Morgan Evans obviously is no stranger to the winner's circle. Raising club lambs and competing against her all summer is challenging. She definitely is a really great showman, and the feeding program she's on is pretty good. She's hard to beat. But the top left one was a reserve at Kansas City 2 years ago. The top right is Bailey Amstutz, and that's the champion market lamb at the Ohio Used Livestock Expo, which that'd be the state fair replacement this last year, since obviously state fair got canceled. And then the bottom left is Morgan Evans, and that is the 2020 Reserve Grand Lamb at Louisville. So that's obviously a huge win. for the Randy Hill crew. And then the bottom right is the Chateau family from here in Ohio. And that sheep was, I think, 3rd overall at the Youth Expo. And then obviously had a tremendous run there through the summer.
Sure did.
Describing them, I mean, you can study all 4 of them. You can tell the angle of their shoulder. You can tell the angle of their hip and hind leg is pretty good. There's some minor differences. You study right in behind these sheep, and I saw all of them in person. There's definitely some differences, but if you study from the side, and obviously you can't see them move in these pictures, they're all very similar built. So, I don't know if you have anything to add, Levi. Obviously,
That's
they're really high quality. They wouldn't have won at a big level like they did.
Absolutely. We talked about each one of these sheep, and you said, when you talk selection, sometimes it's easy to start picking them apart. Well, we put up pictures like this, it's hard to pick them apart, or talk from a bottom up. There's no bottom end here, but
yep.
Some great high level wins, just some really good sheep that I think show off those industry ideals and what we're looking for, what we're feeding for, and we sure appreciate having all these guys on our feeding program.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Let's talk about some goats and turn this thing over a little bit. We've got, I'll just talk about who they are real quick, and you can even talk about the goats, I guess. On the left, both of these goats were actually shown by Mackenzie Statmiller. These would be Pudliner goats, and Nick Pudliner's a great customer of ours and has had a couple really good sales already. I think he's got one this week yet, actually.
Tomorrow night, I think.
Yeah. That doe up top, that would be what you'd call a weather dam. They're shown with hair. And we've maybe feed these ones to have a little bit more bloom than what we do a market goat. But and then the 2 goats on the right hand side are both shown by the Darrow family, and I brag about them a lot. They're good friends of mine and do a really good job feeding these products. But they've had Grand or Reserve at Michigan Livestock Expo several times. But last year they had Grand and Reserve. So just a really good accomplishment there. A couple girls just really do a nice job getting them shown too. So. Yeah, so I guess when you look at these pictures, tell me, just kind of describe what you see in some of them, Andy.
I mean, obviously the top left one, the weather dam there, looks completely different than the other 3, and obviously this one's basically like fitting a fat steer with hair, and you work that hair and make it look right all summer long, and then Nick fit this thing like a fat steer like you would for Beef Expo this weekend. And obviously, like Levi said, you can get these things a little chubbier because you're not looking at maybe raw shape like you are a slick down weather. So you can get them a little stouter, and obviously they're all females or does. So you kind of want them to look a little broody. The good ones are still exotic looking, and then the 3 weathers that are slicked off. I mean, obviously, like I said, you can tell all 3 of these have muscle. That's not a question. You can tell a little difference between the top lines of them and underlines of them, but they're all 3 really good in their angles, and obviously one at a really high level. And putting Grand Reserve at a big show like Michigan Livestock Expo, that's pretty hard to do. So congrats to that family. That's pretty cool.
Yep, absolutely. Perfect. So one thing I want to talk about here, a little expression we like to use quite frequently at Formula Champions is called feed the phenotype. And I think the reason why we came out with this originally is because we don't like recommending a feed based on the weight or the age of the animal. We like to get a really good read at what the animal actually looks like, how they're built, what their, the time frame is that we're trying to feed them for, all those things, and make those feeding recommendations based on all of those instead of, hey, I've got a 750 pound steer, or I've got a 92 pound lamb, what do I feed it? We like to get a picture, get a video, or even come out to your farm in person and, get a look at those animals and, try to really make the best of what they look like physically. We're reading the physical build of the animal and choosing feeds that accentuate their good attributes and correcting their negative attributes or improving their negative attributes. So, Andy, I've got a couple pictures of lambs on this slide, and you should recognize them. I pulled them right off of one of your sales. They came from you. But, I think there's some major builds, and I remember these sheep in person, specifically. They were 2 of my favorites there at your place, but they were a lot different in terms of type and kind and build and size. So tell me a little bit about each one of them. And as we go through the feed program, we can maybe go back and refer to them, and how we would approach them with feed.
Yeah, exactly. And, what I tell people is, when they ask me how to feed a lamb or what, when do I go to what feed, I tell them to leave the scales at home. Don't even weigh them. Each sheep needs fed different. Like these two on the bottom of the screen are prime example. If you feed them both to the same weight and then switch them to the same feed, you're going to have a train wreck. So, obviously the shorter, and this is the same guy showing them. And if you study, like where his center of his knee is compared to the front of these sheep, obviously you can tell the one on the right's quite a bit taller, quite a bit more up and out, and kind of cooler looking. Where the one on the left's going to be a moderate sheep all year long. He's never going to be the biggest one. He's never probably going to be the smallest one, but he's going to be a good one, just like the one on the right. So the one on the right, for example, being taller and skinnier in this picture, we're going to have to get this thing fatter quite earlier than what the one on the left is. And that's where feed the phenotype comes to. Don't worry about weight, judge by condition and look of the sheep. That one is going to probably stay on power takeoff a lot longer than the one on the left. So that one may ride on power takeoff till 120 pounds, maybe. Where the one on the left, we're already thinking about switching that thing to X Factor within the next week or two. So, if you keep that one on power takeoff, the left one till 120 pounds, he's going to be last in class because it'd be a short little fat midget. So, that's where, the one on the right, we need to put more body condition on him. The one on the left, we need to keep condition off of him so he grows.
Yep. And, I've went out and looked at hundreds of goats so far this spring, and I don't have pictures to really go into detail on each one, but I'm seeing a bigger variety in sizes of goats this year, maybe more than ever. We're still seeing some goats that, like you said about that lamb on the right, a little bit more up and out, has a little bit more frame, taller shouldered, maybe has a little bit more of that outline, from the side. But I'm maybe seeing a little bit more moderate frame goats than before too. There are more number of them at that size. Yep. There's going to be a lot of differences in the way you feed those. We'll go into some details on some feeds here next, but just kind of wanted to show there's always going to be a different approach based on the physical build of the animal, not just what they weigh.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if they're tall and skinny, you need to get them fatter quicker. If they're short and moderate, like the one on the left, you got to keep them skinnier longer.
Right. And I don't know if you remember, but, a few years ago at our big conference, I did a presentation comparing livestock to Yao Ming, who's this big 7-foot guy, versus Danny DeVito, who's under 5 feet, and just trying to, give people that visualization there really seemed to help. So, all right. Now, if you have not had a chance, get with your local Kalmbach dealer. These new Formula Champions books are available. They are out. We put a lot of time into work on getting these books put together. So make sure you get your hands on some. If you're going to be at Ohio Beef Expo this weekend, we'll have hundreds of them there and available. But, the next few slides are going to be shots right out of that book. So this is a really good guide to help, give you more information on the products. All right, so this is the lamb section here of that book. We've got 4 major products in the Formula Champions brand for sheep as far as complete feeds. Andy, why don't you go ahead and just guide us through them?
Yeah, obviously the left one there, Cherry Crave, that's a creep feed, and that product's really designed to be fed from week 2 to 6 to 7 of a lamb's life. So, if you're raising sheep, that's obviously a product that would be really, really good to use as a first pellet or a creep that's pelleted right out of the lambing jug. And then, for us, we introduced power takeoff at week probably 4 or 5. We just put a pan of each. We don't mix them or nothing. We just put a pan of each in the same creep pen. And we just let them pick between the pelleted option of the Cherry Crave and then the textured of power takeoff. And then, for us, when people come to buy and then pick up, we send them home right on the power takeoff. That way it's just an easy transition by the time, from weaning and banding and all that, right on into to getting to a new home. They're never switching feeds. They're never switching medications or anything. So it's a really, really good feed. And like that lamb on the right that was on the last screen there, one that's a little taller, one that's a little skinnier. Obviously that one can stay on power takeoff a little longer. And that's an 18 protein, 5% fat. Your white breeds, your Southdowns, Dorpers are becoming big. Something like that, you're probably not going to stay on power takeoff very long because it'll make them too fat. And basically what I tell people is, feed power takeoff until you think your sheep is too fat, and then switch them to X Factor.
Right.
X Factor is a product that we created kind of when I came to Kalmbach with the help of Levi and Kyle Nichols and Jeff Neal. This is a 17% protein. It's a barley-based feed. So it's not going to make them crazy fat, but with that extra barley, it's going to make it a hard fat. So obviously, judges will handle them, and firmness of touch is a big thing, and still keeping them lean and trim. And that's where the barley and the X Factor definitely comes into play. I call X Factor kind of our do-it-all lamb feed. We switch right from power takeoff to the X Factor, depending on the sheep and the phenotype. And a lot of ours will go right on into the fall, state fair fall, and even into Denver shows like that, right on the X Factor. And then the Showstar is a product. It's an 18 protein. It's got a lot more cotton, a lot more fiber in it compared to X Factor. It's a little lower energy. So your white breeds, your Southdowns, Dorpers, different things like that. That Showstar, that's where that really comes into play. And then also on the black face or whatever you're showing, if you got one that's a little too soft or way too heavy condition, just switch them right onto the Showstar and let that ride all the way to your end goal.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I think that's a great description. Some of these sale lambs that have gotten real chubby right away, maybe too chubby. We talk about we want them bloomy for sales, but sometimes they get there a little bit more quickly. Feeding Showstar at maybe only like 2 pounds a day or something like that is a good way to start them, and not get them too fat then from there.
Exactly. I mean, it's to keep it simple. If one's too skinny, feed power takeoff. If he's just right, feed him X Factor. If he's too fat, feed him Showstar.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I want to kind of address something here, and not to catch you off guard, but I know we've talked about it. Cherry Crave, I think, had a lot of excitement right off the bat here. It was new to us over the winter, and a lot of people have jumped in and tried it. And, we recommended feeding that alongside with power takeoff, like you talked about. Some people have trialed it. We'll call it a trial against some of our competitor brand textured feeds. And there's been some different comments here and there about which they prefer, but let's just compare here. Yes, we want you to feed it with a textured feed, but it really should be power takeoff for a couple of reasons. And the way that they're built, they kind of complement each other. They also have the same medication. We don't want to feed it against a feed that maybe has Bovatec or anything like that in it. So you have to add to that, I guess. Right. Guys, if you get a second, go ahead and mute yourself.
I'm really sorry.
Here we go. All right. Just make sure you're muted until you have a question, and then you can unmute yourself and jump in, or you can wait till the end, and we'll have some question and answer time then.
They're showing the food right now.
What did you have to add to that, Andy? About the
obviously Cherry Crave's a pelleted, and then power takeoff's textured. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that one out. Yep. What we've noticed at our farm is when those lambs come out of the lambing jug at a week old, they're not really eating a lot of feed. So for us, we want every bite to be the same, and that's why we always start them on a pellet. That way they're getting the right amount of medication. They're not sorting the medication pellet out. They're not picking the corn out. Every bite's the exact same. And then, when they get older, week 4 or 5, whatever, we'll introduce the power takeoff. And if you put a handful of Cherry Crave in your left hand and a handful of power takeoff in your right, ask which one you would pour some milk on and eat, everybody's going to answer power takeoff. Our textured feeds look superior on the market compared to anybody. So there's no question of why they eat Power Takeoff more than they do Cherry Crave at that age, and they should. That Cherry Crave is really designed for that first couple weeks of that lamb's life. And then as a breeder, from my standpoint, as people are coming to pick them up and take them home, I don't want to send them home on a pelleted feed, because if the neighbor boy comes and feeds when you're out of town or at a baseball game or something and dumps 3 pounds of Cherry Crave, which they probably wouldn't choke on it because it's a mini pellet, but sheep will choke on a pellet, an older sheep, whether it's a ewe or a bigger lamb. Obviously, baby sheep wouldn't. And then obviously from the medication standpoint, some people have trialed the Cherry Crave versus a competitor, and we're not going to mention the name, but that competitor uses all Bobatech. We use all Decox, which is obviously the better medication. That's why we use it for sheep, that is. So with that, you're only getting half of each medication. So your lambs are very susceptible to coccidiosis or whatever it may be. So that's a big no-no if you ask me. And if people do that, I would question their intelligence, because it's not the smartest.
Sure. No, I just wanted to address that. I think you hit that nail right on the head. All right, well, let's jump into the goats here a little bit, and I'll kind of walk us through some of these feeds here first. I like to say we've got a 2-step program for the pelleted feeds and a 2-step program on the textured side for goats. Although, there's some different ways to do it. I think in a perfect world, about all baby goats would start on the Game Plan Starter Developer pellet, whether you plan on going to textured or staying with pellets all the way. Now, years ago, there weren't as many options, especially on the textured side for goats. And we used to use this feed all the way through. The Game Plan Starter Developer would start and finish many champion goats. And we personally, we won a couple shows doing that, with just this one feed, and we would tweak it with some top dresses here and there if we needed to. But this starter developer is available with your choice of medication. We do the Decox, and that's what we've always had. Or when we came out with the new feeds a couple years ago, we wanted to offer it with Rumensin as well. So we do stock this with either one of your, of those preferences there as far as medication. But this is an 18 protein, a 4% fat. So it is going to get those babies growing nice and bloomy, but they're still going to handle really well. And that was something I'll mention. I was at Pudliners here about 10 days ago going through his sale goats, and he said, this is, the first year I haven't had to add anything to my creep feed. He was feeding just the straight Game Plan Starter Developer pellet with Rumensin. His goats handled like $1 million. They had enough bloom on them for their size, but it wasn't burning them out. That was just the perfect combination there, for those goats to keep them growing and doing well. Now, if you want to keep on a pelleted program, start to finish, we do have those options. And it's probably a little bit more popular in the goat world because goats are the king daddy sorters of all species of livestock. They can sort out every individual ingredient even better than what sheep can. So some people do prefer to stay on a pellets, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. We now offer the second option of show fitter. This one's a little bit lower in fat, so it's going to make those babies make those goats handle a little bit rock hard to the touch, and just give them more firmness, more trimness in their condition, make them look a little more athletic from the side. It's going to turn a common goat into more of a real show goat, if you will, going from that Game Plan Starter into the show fitter. So really does a nice job, just making them rock hard and really athletic looking from the side. Now, we came out with these 2 new textured feeds, I believe 2 years ago. And what we did was, there were so many people using our Power Takeoff and X Factor 1-2-step program on their goats that we decided we were going to kind of mirror those products and make the goat versions of them. So, some differences, some minor differences in ingredients, but for the most part, they look pretty similar. Some things you might not see, obviously, is going to be the inclusion of copper in these feeds. We medicate them with Rumensin instead of the Decox, which Rumensin is only labeled for cattle and goats. It's not labeled for lambs. So we do take full advantage of it in the goat feeds and use them in GTO Turbo and Big League. The GTO Turbo would be more similar to the Power Takeoff, one that's going to get them really bloomy. You'll notice it's a 4.5% fat. So That is the highest fat level of the 4 feeds here in this program. But those textured feeds maybe just get them a little bit bloomier in general than what the pelleteds do. It's a really good way to get them growing, get them bloomy, and get some condition on them for the show ring or maybe those early jackpot shows. And depending on your program and kind of what you have in mind, for exercise and start to finish plans, we've had many people use the GTO Turbo all the way to the end. You probably have to exercise them a little bit harder because they're going to get a little chubbier on this. But if you're really going to be committed to the exercise, I think you'll like GTO Turbo all the way. Now, we talk about the use of barley in, say, X Factor. We use barley in Big League, and it does the exact same thing. And same it does is in the cattle feeds. Barley is going to put that harder, firmer handling fat on these, so they don't maybe look as fat. They just handle with the right amount of condition, and they're still firm to the touch. And Big League really does a nice job with that. If you've ever heard of Show Goat Challenger, that's what Big League was formerly known as. So that's the same feed. We had to have a name change in there. So I don't want you to be confused or think we threw a new feed in there last year. But Big League and Show Goat Challenger are the same product. So yeah, Andy, do you have anything to add to that? I think the same general rules apply when we're feeding these goats compared to the sheep.
Yeah, I agree 100%. There's pelleted and textured options, and just pick what your goat likes. And obviously, goats are way pickier eaters than what sheep or cattle or pigs are. So just pick what your goat likes and feed it. Then obviously the fat levels depends on how much exercise you're going to do, when you're going to start showing. For me, if I was showing goats, I'd definitely want the Rumensin in there. But that's my own personal preference.
Yep. I'll just say, for what we do personally at home on the very few goats that we've shown, I do like using the textured feeds, so I'll bring them home right on GTO Turbo. And I also am a little bit of an addict to our top dress called Hard Drive. So I feed a little bit more of that and a little bit earlier than a lot of guys. And sometimes we don't need to go to that second step, the Big League, because adding the protein, keeps them from getting too fat a lot of times. So, that GTO Turbo and Hard Drive top dress has done a really good job for us at home, and we've had some good results for it. But there's a lot of ways to skin the cat with these 4 products. They've all been successful. That's the nice thing is I can tell you about several goats that have won on each one of these products.
Yep.
So yeah, let's keep moving here. Talk about some supplements. And I don't know, maybe this is the entire supplement lineup for Formula Champions. And I guess maybe there is a little bit of a place for about each one of them, because, the one that I would think the least applies is the Power Bloom powdered fat, because in general, you use the liquid fat. Yep. But I have used some Power Bloom on a goat before, and I've heard of people using it on sheep. But do you want to talk about each one of these and when you use them?
Yeah, we can go right down the line to keep it simple. The Afterburner is a 43% protein. So for sheep or goats, if you got one, it's a little too heavy conditioned. Maybe you're not exercising hard, or you don't have the access to treadmill or track or whatever it may be. That's where the Afterburner comes in. For us on the sheep side at our place, we use it a lot on yearling ewes. Those things want to get fat on air when you don't even feed them. We use a lot of Afterburner just to try to burn them down, make them a little skinnier over the ribs. And that's the biggest thing, the difference between Afterburner and Hard Drive. Afterburner will burn fat off the ribs. Hard Drive will just make them harder. Obviously, hence the name Hard Drive. Which, speaking of Hard Drive, that's a 34% protein. For us, we started them on a pretty young age on Hard Drive at that 1/4 pound a day per head. And then, obviously, as we get closer to the show, depending on what they need, we'll up that to 1/2 pound. The biggest thing about Hard Drive for us and why we use it, recommend it so much, is when you put it in front of a sheep, they're going to eat it. It's very palatable, where a lot of these protein supplements out on the market, I get a lot of calls, they won't eat it. And we switch into Hard Drive and it works. So if you want one that needs to touch harder, needs more shape up over its top line. You know, this product you can feed when they're a little skinnier, when you're jackpotting and whatnot, just to add a little bit more pop and touch down their top and down through their lower leg without sacrificing burning a bunch of muscle. That's where the hard drive would come into play. Show and Glow is our 28% protein pellet. You know, it'll add kind of the same effect as hard drive. It's got omega-3 and 6 in it for skin and hair. So for the goats, that's really important. Just try to keep their skin, hair, and, you know, even the weathers that you're slicking off on the goat side, you know, you still want their handle to be right. You still want their hair quality to be good. Just like the fat steers in Texas. I mean, you know, they rinse those things just like we do up here in the north before they slick them off. It's all about getting their hair and their hide right before you go ahead and slick them off. So I would say the Show and Glow for me would probably be more of a goat product than it would probably a sheep. You're not going to hurt anything on the sheep side. You know, it's going to add some amino acids. It's going to add for skin and hair. But in order to add a bunch of shape or trim one down in terms of condition, it's probably not going to do that.
Right.
The filler up product we use in the sheep quite a bit. That is basically a mini pellet that if you add water, it expands. I don't know how many times its size.
I've
so
played
one
with
you're
it.
needing,
it's like 6-7 times the size.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, when we're talking about profile and look from the side, you know, you want their chest forward up in them and then back into a deep flank. That's where the filler up product comes into play. You know, and I wouldn't probably introduce filler up until where you got them about where you want them in terms of condition. And then I would go ahead and add a little filler up. So when it gets in their room and it expands and drops that flank, you know, and I would do that at home way before the show. At our house, we feed, or the people that I'm helping, we feed free choice hay all year round to the show lambs. And with that, you're just building depth of body. And that's where the filler up. If you got one that, you know, needs a lot of work and doesn't have much belly or flank to it, that's where that product definitely comes into play. I mean, we had a Dorset last year. He ate darn near a pound a day of that stuff, and it made a tremendous change in him about 30 days.
Yep.
You
talked about that yearling ewe, or, you know, feeding yearling ewes the Afterburner. I remember that yearling ewe we had from you last year. You know, she kind of lived on a little bit of X Factor with Afterburner and filler up for quite some time.
Exactly. Yep. And she obviously needed more flank, and that's why she got beat. That's the reason she got beat. So,
yeah.
You know, that product definitely helps. You know, if you're trying to get one fatter and really push them, I probably wouldn't add a whole lot of that because there's not a lot of calories in there compared to like X Factor or Power Takeoff. So I would make sure you get them close to where you want them in terms of condition before you really start adding that product. The Hair Magic Plus, you know, that we feed that more for breeding purposes, but on the club lamb side or show lamb side, just to grow more leg wool and grow, you know, it's not going to grow more wool necessarily, but you know, half a sheep's legs or hair or more, and then obviously the goats, you know, they're all hair, they don't have wool, but you know, we'll add some of that to help promote skin and hair growth. And then obviously on the goat side, that's critical. You know, you slick those things off, and I think goats are naturally a little frail-legged, which probably offends some goat breeders. But you know, the more fuzz we get on those things, the more we can build, the bigger legged they look. Which obviously you go to a goat show and one's all you know, adhesived up and clipped to a T. They're pretty cool to look at. So that's where the Hair Magic Plus works. And then if anybody's on here doing any flushing or AI work, we feed it to our donors. There's a lot of stuff in there for reproductive purposes that
we could do that Hair Magic
have a dual purpose for natural shine and hair and hide.
Make them look better.
That's kind of a little secret to that product. Power Bloom is a milk-based powdered fat. You know, for me, that's probably a sheep and goat or a pig product and not a sheep and goat product. I would say you're probably going to have a little hard time getting them to eat it. You know, if you do want to use it, Yeah, I'd mix it with some water and probably drench it if you could, or get them to drink it out. And then the Moonshine is a 98% fat liquid. It's a soy oil based product. It comes in caramel or cherry flavoring. It comes in a 35-pound bucket, which sounds like a lot. Sometimes you can get your dealers to split it. I know some of my dealers, they just buy or keep their gallon milk jugs, and then they just fill a bunch of those out of that 35-pound bucket, and then they kind of sell it individually that way. So if you're really close with your dealer, maybe you can talk them into doing that. But even still, with that being an oil-based product, that stuff's going to be good for years. So like Levi said earlier today, we were talking, he's on the same bucket from 3 years ago?
3 years, yeah.
So, it's not going to go bad on you. How to feed it. It says 10 to 30 cc's per head per day for a lamb and 8 to 15 for a goat. I would start on the bottom side of that, and just depending on how much fat you need to add, I would increase it slowly over time. And basically how to judge whether you give them too much is if they get loose on you or not. If they don't, you can increase it and just keep going up to that 30 cc or an ounce a day. Some people feed a little bit more than that, but I probably wouldn't get higher than an ounce a day. And
no, that's a lot.
the biggest thing is, if you're putting that much free oil in the room and you want to add as much or feed as much hay, and that's where it comes back to feeding free choice hay. If you don't give any hay with a lamb that's on a high dose of Moonshine or a goat, you're going to run into issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we really can't stress that enough, that Moonshine. And guys, you think about, or even if you look up, I don't care, some of these competitor liquid fat products, you're feeding a lot less Moonshine than you are some of the competitor products out there. And we're pretty serious about these feeding rates, and especially when we say to start at the lowest number we're recommending.
Yep.
Moonshine is some pretty potent stuff. Like you said, it's 98% fat and it's oil based. We want to start low. Ruminants especially are really sensitive to oil-based fats, so we want to be really careful, really cautious, and start at that smallest number you see and work your way up very, very gradually. But it is very effective. So
exactly. I tell people Moonshine's basically like going to the local McDonald's or Wendy's and taking a cup right out of their deep fryer where the fries and chicken come from.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
It's pretty potent. So start really low and then work your way up from there.
Yep, you bet.
And of this supplement page, I would say our most popular and go-to products, hard drive. I think for a sheep or a goat, you can feed that pretty much from the time you get home all the way to wherever you're going.
Yeah. I'm like I said, I'm a little bit of a hard drive addict. I feed it, I feed plenty of it, and I start them on it plenty young. You'll be happy to know I haven't started it yet, so don't get on me there. But I think it's a go-to because just what it does and where it's effective. I mean, it'll make a rack really just jump out at you, make them really firm, really wide and thick about that loin edge. I mean, I think it's a go-to. It's a must-have if you really want to be serious and competitive about showing market lambs, market goats. I don't see where you go without feeding it, unless you're having a hard time getting one chubby enough. That's the only time we've had to slow down on feeding it, is if there's one we really need to try to get chubbier. Like that ewe lamb I had from you last year that ended up 3rd overall at OYLE. Like, we were always pushing her, and she wasn't one that naturally put on the bloom. So I couldn't feed her hard drive at all. Yep. She ended up being on nothing but X Factor actually at the end. I think you're right. That's probably the most popular one on this page.
Yeah, so. And we use a lot of the same technologies that's in hard drive and our power takeoff and our X Factor and some of those goat feeds, GTO Turbo and the pellet options, show fitter. So you're already feeding some of this hard drive at a minimum level. Yep. Obviously, sell 50-pound bags for people to top dress. Just help firm them up and give them more pop up high.
You bet. Now, I didn't really put a slide in here about it, but I want to talk, for a quick second about I'll call it the Kalmbach advantage. There's some pretty big benefits to using our products, and I think 2 of them are fortification and consistency. I think those 2 are way high on the list, even even above, it being a family-owned company and the long list of things why Formula Champions, but consistency and fortification. I didn't even put anything on here about Optifirm XL or Lifeguard, but we go several extra steps to really maximize the gut health in these products. The Optifirm XL is a patented yeast product that's trialed and proven to further enhance forage digestibility, meaning you just get the utmost digestion out of every pound of feed that goes into these things. It helps buffer that rumen and keep their the pH in their gut, consistent. And then consistency. You want to talk about, some things we do there, but you maybe starting with molasses.
Yeah, to touch on the Optifirm XL real quick, that's the only FDA approved live yeast to be used in feed manufacturing. It's 100% Kalmbach and Lallemand owned. So with that, the Optifirm, it's key to have in your feed when you're traveling or you're shearing or you're really pushing one. Anytime that lamb or goat or cattle or whatever you're showing goes through any stress at all, that product there is definitely going to help you. And then touch on the molasses. This general region of the United States, we're the only feed manufacturer that we're aware of that makes and blends our own molasses. So we rail pure cane molasses, blackstrap molasses from Florida up, and we actually blend it down. So that's why when you open a bag of our textured feed, they're going to look the exact same every time you get them. A lot of calls that we get from people that are feeding competitor products is, one time they get feed, it's really dry. And then they call their sales rep and complain. Well, then, maybe they fix something, because the next time we get it, it's swimming in molasses, where, those feed manufacturers are not putting any more or any less molasses on it. It's all based off where they're getting it from. And, Paul Kalmbach himself and some of the higher ups at Kalmbach, they basically rented a private plane for a day and went to all the molasses manufacturers in the United States, there's not that many. And that's how they actually decided to make our own, because based off whatever soap stock that they could use to make their molasses cheaper is what they were using for that day. Like the one product they told us was a byproduct of making Sunny D, the little kids drink. Little kids, I still drink it too, but and with that, based off what they're getting their sugar content from and their molasses to make it cheaper and more competitive on the market, that's where you get, depending on how much or how wet it's going to be or how much it'll dry out. So with us, every load of molasses 100% of the time is the exact same. We don't use any byproducts, which that probably doesn't mean a whole lot to people on here. But that's where the consistency and of wetness, which has a huge difference, us compared to our competitors. You get a really dry bag of feed, those sheep are not going to eat it if they're used to a real good molasses feed.
Right. Yeah, good. I'm glad I had you describe that, because you can describe it way beyond what I can. That's absolutely. Just really further promises that consistency every time you open the bag.
Yep.
So I guess before we get into question and answer and open everything up, there was a couple of things I wanted to ask you, Andy, to kind of describe. Let's talk about pushing a lamb versus holding a lamb, because those are the phone calls we get, say mid-June or July. Hey, either my lamb's 140 pounds and I still have 6 weeks to go, or my lamb's 110 pounds. What can I do?
Yep.
So let's talk about pushing one.
Okay. There's a lot of factors that go into pushing one. And I'm probably going to jump to your next question because I probably know what you're going to ask. But if you got one that's underweight and you're really trying to push, I would personally start with a really good worming program. If a sheep's wormy, it doesn't matter how much or what feed you feed, they will not gain. So, if you got one that's really behind, and even though, I just wormed them, 30 days ago, I'd hit them again. And that's where you consult with your vet. Us as feed salesmen, we probably can't make medical claims of what wormer's the best, but I can give you some that maybe what we use. And that would be, your Ivermectin, your Valvasen, your Prohibit. One of those three is normally what we use. we rotate every month, every 30 days. With that, we give a little BOC and a little B12, just to try to make them as healthy as possible. But back to the question of pushing one, I'd start with worming them, and then I would figure out, what product that sheep will eat the most of. If you'll eat the most of power takeoff, which I hope you would, that's where I would start. I would try to get as much power takeoff in as possible. And with that, I wouldn't feed him 5 pounds a day because he'll eat that for about a week and then burn out. So with us, we feed 3.5, sometimes 4 pounds on the high end. We never go over 4. A sheep will eat 4 pounds a day or more, but eventually they'll hit a brick wall and they'll stop no matter what feed you're feeding. So, I would feed 3.5 pounds of power takeoff and just try to get him to eat as much as he possibly can.
Yep. We've had luck at home, with power takeoff, maybe trying to do 3 feedings a day. That seems to help get a little bit more intake in them.
Yeah. And, one thing I would add on the power takeoff, if they start sorting a little bit on that high, if it's a bigger lamb, it's weighing at 120 or 100 or over. If they start sorting a little bit, I'd mix it half and half with X Factor. That power takeoff, the mixer pellet in that's actually formulated for baby sheep. That's why we use it as a creep feed. So it's got a really high level of ammonium chloride in it compared to prevent urinary calculi or kidney stones, which that stuff is very bitter. It's like taking a handful of salt and putting it in your mouth. It does not taste good. So if they start sorting it, that's where I would introduce a little bit of X Factor to mix it half and half and kind of blend that down. And then that way you can maximize your intake.
Right. And, we've talked a lot about lambs here. Let's throw the same thing in the crossover here for the goats. We're going to use that GTO turbo if possible and try to get as much into them as we can, 3 feedings a day. And just like Andy said, that pellet that they'll sort out, if they're going to sort something, it's usually that pellet. It's got the rumensin in it. Rumensin's known to be a little bit more bitter of a medication, plus that ammonium chloride has a bitter taste as well. So, we kind of can use that and make sure that we're feeding at a level that's not just making them bored by having feed out in front of them all the time, but as much as they'll eat in a day is kind of your happy medium. Exactly. Now let's totally turn the tables here, Andy. We need to hold a lamb now. We're 140 pounds with the 145 limit, 6 to 8 weeks to go. What are we doing?
Good question. I tell people that buy from us, we track average daily gain. It's very easy to calculate. So we'll start weighing these things as soon as we get them home. We'll weigh them, and then we'll weigh them in 2 weeks and figure out average daily gain, which obviously a smaller sheep's going to gain quicker than a bigger sheep. But for me, if you're 145 pounds or 140 pounds with 8 weeks to go and you got a 145 pound weight limit, we didn't manage this thing good enough early on. So, that's where we go to the X Factor or the SoStar a little quicker. We don't feed probably as much. And then obviously that's where exercise comes into play. Sheep are very athletic. They love to run backwards and forwards. So we will exercise a lot to help maintain weight. And that's where, feeding that 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds of X Factor or SoStar, we won't give them much more than that. We'll go buy just the most average first cutting hay we can find. It's not moldy and not real stemmy. And we'll basically just let them chill on that for a little while. Just try to level that average daily gain as much as we can. And then that way at the end, that last 10 days or whatever, we can bump the feed back up. We can get our hard drive back in. We can get some of those additives back in so we can freshen their top up, maybe a little drench or whatever people mix there or add to their feed, just to try to make them look better and handle right.
Yeah, you got it. Good. So you did mention the word exercise, so I want to pick your brain a little bit about that. I'll start with saying this. It's happened more than once. I've gotten to a farm and these sheep are like super lean and just don't have much to them and muscle or fat, to be honest with you. And, I ask them what they're doing. They're like, oh, our daughter's real proud of these sheep. She walks them 1.5 miles, 2 miles every night. So let's, give me your take on exercise.
Yeah, there's two things in life that really bother me. One of them is when people don't get out of their car and walk to their mailbox to get their mail and driving down the road. And the second thing is when people say, well, I'm walking them down the road 2 miles. That's a horrible idea. For exercise, what we recommend is, obviously treadmilling's getting to be a hotter commodity. More and more people seem to be doing that. I personally tend to like treadmilling. When I was showing, we actually tracked them, ran them with myself or a dog, which that obviously takes a lot of resources to put up a track and do all that. But a very simple way, and what my sister won Ohio State Fair back in 2005. Put a little age on her. We basically got three big dump truck fulls of dirt and built like a 20-foot mound in our pasture, and we mowed it every couple of days. You don't want them to eat the grass because they'll get real loose on you. But we would put it, it was probably 50, 75 yards from the barn, and we would let those sheep out every day, and they would run as fast as they could, up and down that hill and back into the barn. It made it so simple for us. It wasn't even funny. So something like that is just very easy and doesn't cost a lot of money to make. We just fence in a little area, put a giant hill on it, and we just run them up and down it. Another thing that doesn't cost any money is, if you got a long lane or something, you can take them back and then let them go. And then every time they run back to the barn, obviously you need to train them where the barn is. We have people that take them back a long lane, like a mile-long lane to the woods, let them go. And as soon as they get home, those sheep go to a pan full of feed. And you'll be surprised how dumb sheep or goats can be and how you trick them into doing that, because they'll do it time after time after time. You think they just give up and walk? No, they'll run every single time.
Yeah, that's a good point. You want to, if you've got the sheep or goats out of the barn, you either want to be, if you're walking, it's only for the sake of practice and showmanship.
Yep.
Otherwise, you want to be running. And honestly, I'll just say this: we've had goats from Dale Hummel, and Dale's told me himself, a human cannot run a goat on a halter fast enough to build muscle. It is not possible. It is not going to happen. So you're right. I like how you said that, about letting them go. We do that. We've got a long lane back along between a cornfield and a ditch bank at our place, and we take them way out there. We jog them out as fast as we can. But, again, we're not going to build any muscle running them out there. It's letting them go and chasing them back that's really doing the work. And I'll tell you this, too. We like to feed them. We put feed in their feeders right as we're pulling them out of their pens, because then they have that huge incentive to run back to the barn. And a lot of times we'll even leave one animal standing at the barn because they'll want to turn around and run back to its buddy, So yeah, that tends to help.
Well, to put it in human perspective and make it very simple, if you ever watch the Olympics, yep, you look at the people that run the long distance, the however many miles, way more than I ever want to run, versus the 100-yard dash, 100-yard sprinters.
Right.
The 100-yard dash, their legs are ginormous.
Yeah, we want sprinters.
Where, the guy that's been running, that runs a long distance, it looks like he needs about 5 cheeseburgers just to live for the next hour. So yep, it's not about how long or how far you run them. It's about how quick you run them.
Sure. Yep. No, that's a good point. So I think we're to the point here where we've answered all the questions I had for you and all the hypotheticals that I wanted us to come to. So I guess at this time, if you guys have questions for either one of us, unmute yourself, and we'll try to manage you guys with whatever questions you have. But we appreciate you jumping on here with us. What questions do you guys have?
There's no such thing as a dumb question.
Exactly. Not everybody.
Hey, Levi, this is David Bach.
Yeah.
Hey, what are you gonna feed I'm gonna call her a senior doe goat going back to the fair again as a senior?
Yep.
Yeah. So if she's you mean senior, you mean like a yearling doe?
Mature doe. Yep.
Mature doe. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and so to get her right, I would say we probably will, we'll look at her body condition first, and if we feel like we need to push her at all, which I doubt we will, we can use like that GTO turbo. But I would say we're more likely to use that big league and maybe throw a little hard drive at it. We can kind of manage her condition, as we go along. Andy, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I would probably say based off condition, probably the big league, some hard drive, and then probably free choice hay.
Yep. Yeah.
And depending on condition, if she's fat, I would get worse hay. If she was skinny, I'd get better hay.
You got it.
Okay.
If you're
Thank you.
short and hairy, you can probably get her a little bit chubbier than you would, say, your Weathers, David.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
Yep. And I'll be out and I can check her out too.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Hey, Levi.
Yeah.
This is Caitlin, but what hay do you like better, the grass hay or the alfalfa for lambs?
Andy, I'll let you answer that.
Soft hay. You don't want it to be a bunch of stems. I probably wouldn't go out and get the best alfalfa you could possibly buy, because they'll get way too much energy out of that, eat way too much, and probably not care about their feed. But I would just get a nice, solid, average grass alfalfa hay. What's that?
No, I think you're good. I think that was someone else chirping in there.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, Caitlin?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
What other questions do we have?
How much hay are you actually feeding? Are you giving free choice hay to the lambs, or just like a softball size?
Well, we kind of use the softball, I think, more in the goats. The goats, just from feeding both, I'll tell you, I think the goats are more likely to fill up on hay if you've got a good hay. And then, like Andy said, they can get so full on the hay, they'll neglect their feed. Yep. But, he said if you're picking a softer grass hay, you can leave that out free choice as long as it's not too rich.
Yep. We'll actually, which I yell at Levi quite often for this, we'll actually take one of our old sheep mineral tubs, 125-pound mineral tubs, and just fill it full of hay and put it in the back corner of the show lamb pens.
It's already in this year. You don't have to get on me.
Good.
Yeah.
So, a lot of it depends. If you got one that you're late, you're smaller on weight, or you're way too skinny, and your fair's getting real close to that first jackpot, I'd probably pay them just a little bit, not free choice, but I'd still give them a lot. Just make sure they're cleaning up what you want of the feed, and then let the hay depend on, how far you're away from the show, body condition, whether your lamb's on track to meet that end goal that you have. So if you got one you're really pushing, you probably can't let them fill up on hay.
Yep, perfect.
And hay will keep a sheep healthier than anything. So if you want to keep the vet away, a sheep is a ruminant, just give them as much hay, and that'll keep them.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else?
What do you want to weigh at showtime?
Ooh, good question.
A lamb or a goat?
Lamb.
Oh, are you talking at your county fair probably?
Yeah.
It probably depends on the judge, to be honest with you. And I don't want to age people, but if person judging is north of 50, you probably want them big. And that's kind of the general rule. We try to figure out who's judging, and it seems like the older judges really like them big, where some of the younger ones probably really don't care what they weigh. I judged a county fair in Indiana 2 years ago, and used a 115-pounder to be reserved. So, if you go to the sale barn, actually the smaller weight the lamb is, the higher dollar it'll bring. So, for me, it doesn't really matter.
All right. Well, let's also consider this. We're in Ohio, and at most of these county fairs, they don't like to tell us who's judging. So
yeah, your optimal range would be that 130 to 145 range, probably.
Yeah, I'd agree. If you're getting much bigger than 145, you may be limiting yourself on if
Yeah,
the judge.
I would, I would just for me, I would figure out what your lamb looks like and go from there. Like that sheep on the right, back to the very second or third slide we had, the sheep to the right is going to have to be a lot bigger and a lot heavier to look right than what the sheep on the left would be.
Yeah.
So, you know, if those both go to Ohio State Fair, the one on the right is going to weigh 10 to 12 pounds heavier than what the one on the left will to look right.
Yeah, and to parlay that into the goat side, I mean, there's maybe even bigger variables there. I mean, I've seen goats weigh, you know, in the high 50s and get the job done because they were the right goat to win it in the high 50s, more moderate, just little powerhouses. But, you know, if you go south into Texas and Oklahoma, you see them being shown into the
Reading the physical boat and we're choosing feeds.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if the one on the right weighs the same as the one on the left and they're in the same class, the one on the right is probably going to look tall and skinny and no muscle.
Yeah.
Where if the one on the right or the left weighs the same as the one on the right at a higher weight, the one on the left is going to look short, midgety compared to the rest of the class.
Right. But, you know, like in the general sense, like we did for lambs in the goat world, I would say if you're in the low to mid 80s in Ohio, I would say you're probably in the right time frame or weight frame. You know, we've had, you never know what you're going to get for a goat judge, especially at these county fairs. And, you know, say we've had some that won't even look at a goat that weighs over 85 in final drive because in their mind, that's where they're ideal. So, you know, I'd say if you're shooting for 85, I'd say you're pretty safe. I've got a goat at home right now that I think's probably going to look better at 95 to 100. So hopefully our judge is going to agree with me, you know, when that day comes. But it just like Andy said, it really comes back to the build of the goat and feeding that phenotype. So, Anybody else questions? Well, hopefully we didn't bore them too long, Andy, because we were.
How much feed
feed
your lamb every day?
What's that?
So we've been over.
How much feed should you feed your lamb every day?
How much should you feed your lamb every day? It depends on what the sheep looks like, but the average rule would probably be 2 to 2.5% of their body weight.
2 to 2.
So
maybe starting around 2 to 2.5 pounds, and you.
Yeah, like right now, most of our sheep that we sent home are on a pound morning, pound night. So 2 pounds a day, and then, you know, obviously, you know, as we get bigger to a show and closer to show, and they get bigger in weight, you know, our standard rule, probably in the middle of some, 3 pounds is a pretty good rule. If you got one that's a little skinny, you feed a little bit more. If you got one that's too fat, you probably feed a little less. But
yeah. All right, guys. Anybody else?
I think there's one in the chat, Levi.
Okay.
How much does a lamb gain each day? Oh, a lot of it depends on genetics and what you're feeding. And you know, obviously you can control that a lot by what product you're feeding and how much.
Good. So we also have a question. Will we be posting this on the Facebook page? And I would say it will not be on the Facebook page, but give us a couple days. We'll try to shorten it a little bit, you know, take off, you know, the beginning when everybody was just getting on and simplify it a little bit. We'll put it on our YouTube channel. We actually have a YouTube channel that we post a lot of these videos, any of our Facebook lives and stuff like that. Andy's been on there with us before, and we do all kinds of good stuff on that. So check it out on YouTube. It's just Formula of Champions. But I see another question. Do you prefer to show ewe lambs or wethers? I assume she means in the market lamb class.
Yeah.
You want to answer that?
In the market lamb class, I would probably definitely prefer a wether. You know, an average judge will probably pick a wether a lot more than a ewe, and it's kind of no different than humans. Generally the male of the relationship is bigger and stouter and has more muscle. In our ewe lambs, we want them to look like ladies because that's what they are. So, they don't have as big a muscle. We keep them a little skinnier. We keep them cooler looking than probably what we will those. So, I would probably personally prefer, if you're going to show at your county fair and only buy a couple, I'd probably prefer to buy some leathers.
Okay, another question. Is it too early to shear our lambs? They're in southern Indiana, still 30-degree nights. You and I talked about this earlier today.
I don't think it's too early. I would probably wait where you got a couple of days of nice weather, kind of like what we had here in Ohio, at least Central Ohio last week. It was getting up to 70 in the day and that 45 range at night. So if it's going to get down to 30 every night, I would probably not shear them just yet. But when you get a nice couple of days, we get more into spring here and closer to planting season. It gets warmer, gets drier. I would definitely not be afraid to shear them.
Good.
They'll grow so much better sheared than they will not sheared.
Good. Couple more questions. Let's see if we're at the bottom. What is your favorite lamb you've ever seen?
Oh.
You're probably a little partial on that one.
I'm a little biased. Probably the one that just won Kansas City last year.
It was pretty good. I was there and saw him myself.
I don't know. I mean, there's.
Is that your favorite one you've ever raised? You can say that.
That's my favorite one we've ever raised. I mean, I think we got some this year. That have potential to beat that one. But I would say, as a general rule, that's probably my favorite show lamb. In terms of bucks, looking at bucks, I mean, the unicorn buck and gorilla buck that Ty Allen has in person are incredible. The bullseye buck that Troyer had, that thing was incredible in person. And then, drop the mic at rules. Those drop the mic's probably my favorite I've ever seen, to be honest. Which I have a lot of data to support that, but that's probably my favorite.
Sure. Yep. Cool.
I think there's another one.
Is there? Weight-wise. So most ideal weight. I mean, in general terms, what's most ideal weight to you? Just put one number out there. Don't say depends on the sheet. Just say a number.
If I was going to judge a state fair, 135 to 142 pounds.
There you go.
I don't know.
Yep.
I mean, and a lot of it depends on your state. If we got anybody from Indiana, Ohio State Fair and Indiana State Fair sheep shows are only, 10 days apart, not even. Where Ohio, we have a weight limit of 140 pounds, which means you cannot weigh over 140.
Right.
Where you go to Indiana, next state over, 10 days later, and if you weigh 140 pounds, you're small.
Yeah.
There was 3 years ago at Ohio State Fair, the champion lineups, we sell all the breed champions and all the reserves in the top 5. They all go to slaughter, and their average weight was like 126 pounds. Where if you take that to Indiana, you're tiny.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of it depends on your state.
Yeah. What do you recommend doing every day for leg hair and leg wool growth?
That's a topic right there that everybody has a different opinion on. Me personally, our families, we work legs every day or every other day. We limit the amount of shampoo that we use, and simply for the fact that if you don't get it all out, they cause dandruff, and then the sheep start itching and scratching at their legs and biting. So we kind of limit the shampoo, maybe once every 2 weeks. We use mane and tail conditioner, or what we used a lot back when I was showing was the Suave coconut conditioner from the local Walmart or whatever you have.
$1.99.
What's that?
$1.99.
Yep. And then, we rinse that out, blow dry it. And then, we use products like Clean Sheen. There's products out there like the green stuff.
Right.
Weaver's got one. It's called Leg Pop, I believe. Or every company's got just different ones. We used to use Revive quite a bit. And I would probably really only recommend using the Revive right before you soap, because that's really, really heavy oil. So I would use like a clean sheen type product. And then obviously, we wrap their legs. That's becoming more and more popular. See one chewing on their legs, get some leg wraps and wrap them so they don't eat all their leg wool.
Yep.
So that's kind of our judgment.
Good. All right. Next one. Do you have a preference on shears?
Whatever ones work the best. Premier makes good shears. I wouldn't really worry about the shears that you use, but the blades. Never use super surgicals. Looks like you skinned them with a knife. So never use those. When we're Jackpot, we tend to use fines just to keep a little bit more wool on them and maybe try to prevent some fungus, which I know fungus is the dirty word, but and then going to the end show, Ohio State Fair or whatever, we always clip the surgicals.
Good deal.
So,
all right, let me see if I can get through this one. The Yoder Toter Dilly Bar kids from Pennsylvania. Hold on, it just scrolled down. Want to know what the best product to keep them from getting wrung out and fresh? I got an easy one to start with, and that's Electrolytes.
Yeah. So the Yoder Toter, it's a group of girls from Pennsylvania. Obviously, commented. Every time they come pick up sheep from us, they bring dilly bars. So they're by far our favorite customer.
I got you.
My dad will eat a whole box of them in about 3 minutes. So, what product to keep them, not wrung out? Electrolytes and water. I mean, a lot of people when they go to shows, they don't water them. I mean, just like thinking about going and running on the treadmill or the track yourself, when you're done and you've been through stress and you're dehydrated, what's the first thing you want? Water.
Water gets overlooked quite a bit, I think.
And then there's all kinds of drenches and different things that people mix up. Whatever, we won't even get into that. But
yeah. How about something to keep the flies away? Any favorite products there?
Fly spray.
Do you have a favorite?
We go to the local TSC, and I don't even know what it is, but it comes in a gray, like tall, skinny bottle that's got a pump sprayer on it. That's what we use. I don't even know what it's named.
I really like that SWAT from Sullivan Supply.
Yeah. Yep.
And I swear part of why I like it so much is it comes out in like a fog, and especially on the sheep, it seems like it goes on really evenly. So I think SWAT's been our favorite at home. This is the last one on the list. So give us your real quick after Jackpot show anti-fungus routine.
Ooh. That's another question that's pretty tricky. I would probably consult with your vet first off, because they will help you more than anything on this. But we always would wash the lambs or spray some kind of a disinfectant on them when we got them home. And I'm not going to mention products, because if you use the wrong one, you can burn them or whatever. So that's where consulting with your breeder or a vet was where that would really come into play. We had some blue disinfect we mixed with water, and our vet told us how to do it. And we would take a towel and literally towel those sheep down from front to rear about twice when we got them home. And then the biggest thing that people don't do is when you go to a Jackpot and you come home, you disinfect them, that doesn't mean it's gone or it's cured. Get your hands on those sheep every single day. And a lot of fungus you can't see physically. So, we tell people, rub them from front to rear. A lot of it's in their head and their neck and their ears. Feel for those rough spots, and then we pick them off. And actually for fungus treatment, what I recommend and what we use a lot of is just go to your local drug mart or whatever you got and buy Lamisil foot cream. So for athlete's foot, it comes in a cream. We just use Lamisil on a lot of it. Some people use like fluid film from your local John Deere dealership or whatever. I think that stuff's gross, so I don't really use it, but it does work. You know, there's all kinds of different products out there, disinfecting shampoos, fungus fighter from Solvent. There's all kinds of different. You know, that's where I would find you a family that shows a lot and has success keeping fungus out, and then you know, go from there.
Yep. Last one we've got. Have you ever treated sunburn on sheep?
My question for Clayton would be: are they outside all the time? If they are, I would probably try to get some kind of tent or shade or something they can get out of the sun, because sheep, you know, outside all the time with no wool. So yes, they are outside all the time. I would get you some kind of shade built, where your sheep can get out of the sun, because if you're going to Jackpots or whatever, you know, and you bring them home, put them right out in the sun, they will fry. And they had shelter. You know, maybe like a Pro Cool blanket or something like that. Judy's Western Wear down in Texas, they make blankets. I'd keep a blanket or some kind on, and if they have shelter, you know, these sheep don't really need to be running outside all day. So I would lock them in the barn or whatever during the day, and then, you know, when you're doing chores or it gets towards dark and it gets a little cooler, you know, that's where you let them out, or let them out all night. But in the heat of the summer, they do not need to be outside.
Yep. Perfect. All right. So I think that catches us up on all the questions, you guys. If you have any more, you can send them to the Formula Champions Facebook page, or you can go to formulachampions.com and ask us questions there and find different contact information and things like that. So we have had a lot of fun tonight. Hopefully you found this event informative. Andy, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I appreciate it and always enjoy it. Yeah, hopefully you guys got something out of this, and keep an eye out for another one of these things like this for pigs coming up here soon. I don't have a date yet, but I'm hoping I can ring in a couple buddies of mine, Jackson Johnson, maybe Tim Traddles, Brian Forrest, maybe Brady Littlefield, a couple of those guys to jump on with us and do another one of these. All right, you guys have a great night, and thanks a lot.